Hi guys, Luke Muncher here, back with another YouTube video. This time I'm joined by Raven,
Hello.
and we're going to be talking about my survey that I did at the end of the season for Season 9, Into the Quantum Realm, and talking about the results. Had 257 people vote for that, so very excited to talk about that. But first, Raven, let everyone know where they can find you.
Yep, so I'm Raven, Hearthstone caster, and now pretty much full-time Marvel Snap streamer and kind of caster at the same time. I mainly stream on Twitch on Raven HS, so just go to there to check me out, or Twitter at Ravencast if you want to see some spicy hot takes about the game.
Alrighty, appreciate it. And then so we're just going to jump into the first thing. So there was 9 questions in total. So we're going to go ahead and jump into the first two here. So I asked, what's the card that needs to be nerfed the most in the game and buffed the most in the game. So we have the results here. So nerfs, I don't think it's really a surprise with the two spots, Arrow and Leech. Getting very close, similar in votes here. You can see 23.7% and 20.6%. But then followed by Shuri, Thanos, and then a tie between Galactus and Red Skull. And I think Red Skull might be a little bit of a surprise to some people, but I think it's obviously tied into with Shuri of being just the biggest thing that you can Shuri.
I think what's interesting about this, because I'm a little bit surprised that Aero is first, but I think this really shows that a lot of players don't like getting beat by a card way more than getting beat by a deck, if that makes sense. Because, for example, I'm pretty sure, yes, the Thanos deck is the best deck in the game, or the Shuri Red Skull best deck in the game. So you'd think, well, hang on a minute, Shuri and Thanos are the key cards in those decks, right? They don't work without them. But it's the moment you'd lost to Aero dragging your winning play over to a stupid location, right? Like, I think that's clearly what sticks with people and why Aero's so high, because I wouldn't put Aero that high for me personally, but I understand why people get upset by it because it's like that one card that beats you, not the deck, so to speak.
Yeah, and for sure. And I think part of it is the power of the card. And it is, if you're playing against Thanos, you see a stone come down early, you know what you're playing against. You see Shuri on turn 4, you know the Red Skull and Taskmaster are probably coming. But Arrow can be played in pretty much any deck. So you can just be playing your normal strategy thinking you're all good to go, and then Arrow locks it up for them, pulls everything into a lane. I'm surprised that Arrow was higher too. I really think Leech, there's a lot of negative hate for Leech. So I really thought Leech would be higher up there. Shuri's an interesting one, and I've listened to you talk about Shuri before. I really don't think Shuri's going to get a change. Maybe could go up to 5. I'm not sure, but I think that would really hurt the power of the deck a lot. But yeah, it's very interesting. And then seeing Galactus is kind of funny too, because they've said that has a very low cube rate win. Like you're not getting a lot of cubes. Usually you're getting like a cube or two out of a Galactus win. So very
Yeah,
interesting there.
I think it's like lower win rate, good cube like gain rate, but the number of cubes you gain is quite low, right? It's just you can gain a lot of cube time with Galactus. But yeah, I don't even know how you nerf Galactus because it would just need a rework, right? Because to me, Galactus, even though I don't particularly like the card, I don't think it's overpowered. I just think the design of the card doesn't really work how anyone would actually want it to. So like I don't even know where you'd start, but again, I think you see here because it was public questionnaire sort of thing you did that. Well, this is just what do people not like seeing show up, and then the lose screen appear, right? Because you see the Aero, the Leech, the Galactus, Thanos, of course, and Red Skull's on there as well. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. But Galactus, I think, is there because it's more of a feels bad card because you play like 2/3 of a game and then Galactus comes down and it feels like, oh, well, nothing I just did really mattered. Let's see if I have the tech card to win, right? It's kind of an awkward feeling card.
Yeah, I know when I play against Galactus, they Galactus on 4 or 5. It's just, do you have the null or big follow up or not? Did you draw it or not? So,
or like, do you run Aero or whatever to stop it? Are you ahead on board? Because really, a lot of it is just okay, well, I queue into Galactus, look at my hand. Does it have the card that beats Galactus? No. Okay, I lose. Does it have the card that does beat Galactus? Yes. Okay, I win. And that really is as straightforward as it is in those pure Galactus decks. Obviously, there's some that are a little bit more different, especially with Nimrod. Some people are playing like Galactus with, like, and it's a Nimrod deck that does just throw in Galactus now and again. But yeah, I think for the pure Galactus deck, it's very just 50-50 how the game plays out.
Yeah. And one that we kind of skipped over a little bit is Leech. But I think it's the same problem what you're talking about with Galactus. I don't think there's a way you can't really make the energy go up or down or power or stuff to really fix Leech. Leech, you're going to have to rework the whole ability. And
Yeah.
I just, that's the only way to fix that card.
And I think my worry is because, as you probably well know, I've talked a lot about buffs, nerfs, problem cards. I talk about stuff like that a lot. But I see a lot of people saying, oh, Leech should just hit the two cards on the left, like Nakia, or a random 2 to 3 cards. But to me, does that really change the issue? Because your opponent would still just generate Leech somehow, whether they play it on 5 or whatever. And then it's just, did they hit the important cards or not? Like, is that a fun interaction? Do you know what I mean? It's not,
Yeah.
you don't have to think about anything. Your opponent doesn't think about anything other than when and how to play Leech. And it's like, well, did it hit my Doom or my Arrow? No? Okay, well, I keep playing and probably win. If it does, I leave. So, oh, well, that sounds like just on a smaller scale, just that Galactus issue, right? Where it's just, well, yeah, Leech technically wouldn't be as strong because it's hitting less cards, but you still have the same outcome in a lot of games, right? It either hits cards that don't matter and you win, or it hits cards that do matter and you lose, and it's just, right. I'd rather the card just be either redesigned completely, or like you said, like the only thing that's going to happen is okay, Leech is a 5/2, which yes is a nerf. Obviously, it weakens the card, sure. Before anyone starts with negative, yep, that caveat always exists. We don't
Yeah.
even need to mention it, but I think like yeah, it weakens it, but people are either going to play Leech by cheating out, or they're not going to play Leech, right? I don't think the actual power amount massively changes the choice of whether you put it in a deck or not.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with everything said there. Leech needs. I understand the need for Leech, like the devs are talking about it being like a release valve card. But the way it feels now with if you get turn 3 leeched or turn 4 leeched off like a lockjaw or something, just feels terrible. Just you know, like what's the point of playing the game? So hopefully we'll see a change here soon with that. So moving over to the buffs a little bit, I think it's pretty clear of what card people want the most, with 25% going to Crystal, and that was the thing too. Is you see the first place and second place here, but then third, fourth, and fifth are all very close. These were like 1 or 2 votes off from each other, basically. So very interesting. But Crystal, everyone wants some love there. Cyclops, that's some of the people I've been seeing scream since closed beta that Cyclops, the leader of the X-Men, is a normal effect card. Black Bolt, I think this is probably was fueled a little bit by this season by having Stature come out and people wanting Stature to be a better card, and then realizing that only Black Bolt and Moon Knight are enablers that we have. And then Leader, feel like Leader got done dirty. I feel like Leader died for Leech's sins for sure, with being just completely unplayable now. And then Quake. Quake's another one that I've seen people really like and would like to see more play, because moving around locations can really be impactful for moving around stuff like Sanctum or something that couldn't get played in but now can.
There's a couple I don't understand. Well, there's a fair few. I don't understand most of this list. Actually, this list really, it didn't surprise me, but it kind of does. Mainly because I guess I've got weird opinions on the game. But Crystal, however harsh this is for Crystal fans, I just don't care about. Because buffing a card that can draw cards is a very dangerous game to play in a 6-turn, 12-card deck game. So I'm kind of okay with Crystal just being rubbish and kind of forgotten about. Obviously, I don't want any card to be unplayable, but again, unless they just give her a new ability, I think, well, if you buff it to make it playable, suddenly, hang on a minute, oh, you just draw your deck every game, you know,
Yep.
potentially, right? And then we're in a really weird game state. And then Cyclops, there's no buff for, you can't buff Cyclops, so again, you would need an ability rework, in which I'd rather they just make a new card, you know. And I don't know, you know, I've talked about this a lot, but I would love to see the future of cards be certain characters in certain times or certain versions of them. So I don't use the word variant because now they use it for skins in game, of course. But for example, they could do like a new version of Cyclops that isn't like, obviously the original's like the sort of X-Men 97 style Cyclops, and then they could do, you know, the newer, more modern Cyclops with an ability. Great, and call him whatever, you know, call him whatever name you want. Same with some of the other cards as well, but Cyclops, you can't really buff because what, you make it just a 3/5 flat. You make
I think people just want it to
2/4,
have an
like,
ability.
yeah, exactly. I just don't think they'll just randomly give him one. Although it
Yeah.
is a shame because he has a great visual effect. No one's arguing that. Black Bolt, I wish I had stature. I've been crying about it the last few days. Where whatever they do about this improving the collection thing, right, that they're talking about, I hope they just let me get more cards. That's all I ever want, because I really want to play with stature. But then suddenly you look at all the new cards coming out. It's like, well, I can pick one. You know what I mean? It's very difficult to choose. But again, with Black Bolt, do you just give him more power? Do you really make a 5/9 discarder card? Like, maybe you make him like a 4/6 or something, right? You know, to maybe that's how you not increase power but decrease mana somehow. Leader can go in the bin, don't care. And I think I'm alone. I think Quake's fine. Do you think Quake's Ben needs a buff? Because a 2/3 is decent stats. Quake's ability is very strong. I just think people just choose not to, like, people don't value the ability enough to warrant playing it. And I think that's just a player choice more than anything.
So I think it's the Quake ability being tied to the being played in the center. I think this was actually a suggested change that I made in one of my other YouTube videos. Make sure y'all go check that out. Where I suggested 5 changes for cards, and Quake was a simple change of just making it the first card you play. Because something they've talked about with Quake and Crystal, with the effects having the restrictions, is they want to give you the option to play the card without activating the effect, unless in case you don't want to activate that effect. So I think making Quake activate if it's the first card you play, then you can reorder it in a way where the effect doesn't go off if you don't want it to, without limiting that it can only go in the center lane to activate.
It would also be interesting, something I thought about, because Quake is random, right? Whereas, what if you imagine the 3 locations being a circle, they just shuffled once, like
if it if it rotated like, to the right, if everything
rotate right, rotate left. If you understand what I mean, right? So like so the player with Quake not only gets to choose, obviously, if they play Quake and move stuff in the middle or whatever, but also has that knowledge of, okay, there's the 3 locations. If I play Quake in the middle, the 3 locations will shift, and I know where they're going to be, because that is a lot of knowledge, maybe too much. But like, I thought that could be a nice change where they just make it so both players know exactly what Quake's going to do, but the player with Quake has the knowledge that it can happen if they want, because that wouldn't even need any I'm not sure the wording on Quake now off the top of my head, but they could just change that on like a mechanical level, right? It's not like they have to redesign the card. Instead of it going random, they just shunt them around, right? So that would be interesting. But I think Quake's actually okay. I played a few decks a while ago with Quake because people were asking me about, oh, Quake needs a buff, it needs a buff. So I just put Quake in my deck. It won me some games. It was a 2/3 in other games, which is kind of fine as far as I'm aware. And I was like, yeah, it's just people don't want to play Quake because it doesn't consistently win you games, right? I think that's the, whereas, for example, especially at that time, I was trying it, everyone was just playing Scorpion, where, well, Scorpion, -1's the power, right? That is a very reliable effect. You know what it's going to do. But with Quake, because it's a bit inconsistent, I think people honestly undervalue it a little bit. Like, I'd put Quake in most decks you want to run a 2-drop. I think you could just put Quake in, give it a whirl and see how it goes, because I think the effect, as you mentioned, to just suddenly change the battlefield is huge, right? It can just win you games or completely mess with your opponent.
And I know that it will take a little bit away from randomness that Ben Brode seems to love in card games. But yeah, I think what you're talking about, change where it just would rotate to the right or left, I think that would be a huge deal because giving you that knowledge for you can play around of how it's going to go. Because I think it's also dependent on the locations. I think that's one thing. There is really locations that you can abuse with it. I've seen my opponent do it to me. I wasn't big brain enough to do it. But when Bar Sinister was like the hot location on the weekend, they played something awesome into Bar Sinister, got a whole bunch of copies, then played Quake so they could then Bar Sinister something else. Yeah. And so, yeah.
Yeah, there's cool things you can do. I just think if you take a card as crazy as Quake, you have to accept that sometimes it's a 2-3. Mm-hmm. And that's, but it's not like it's, if it was a 2-1, right, I'd understand. People like this is rubbish because the stats aren't even relevant, a lot of the time, right? And if it doesn't do the thing, if you don't want to move the locations, then you've got a 2-1 in hand that does nothing, right? That's horrible. But I think a 2-3, I think it's okay. I think if it did do that guaranteed shuffle, it would probably have to be a 2-2 or a 2-1 because that knowledge of at any moment you can choose to just spin the locations would be so strong in game. It would be so brutal.
And I think that helps too.
Imagine that in battle mode.
If
you know your opponent's got Quake, you sat there going, do I play in this location or that one? Because if I play in this one and they shuffle it, I'm screwed.
Yeah, that would definitely be a mind game in battle mode of just thinking, do they have Quake? Are they going to draw Quake? So very interesting there. So we're going to move along to the next one. So there's a lot going on with this graphic, so I'll break it down for you a little bit. So the next thing was I asked, the questions were, what is the best card in the energy slot? And you just put in one card. So I just tallied up the totals for everyone and just listed the top 5 here for each energy cost of the cards. Now, starting off here with the one energy cost, very clear winner here with Sunspot with 73% of the votes. And then we have Iceman, and then it falls off, and then we got Bast, Zero, and Yondu. So I think this list is pretty good for what you think about like the meta and how stuff is. Like you see Sunspot in almost every deck. The effect is so good. A lot of people pair it up with armor. Spoilers, the most voted 2 energy cost card too, just to protect it, and you can just grow it. And there's a lot of strategies that you're fine with taking a turn off because I'm sure everyone else has said plenty of times, but this card game is very different. You don't always want to play on curve. It is about playing the right card at the right time for the right situation. So Sunspot, you just letting it soak and getting a little bit extra power is really a big deal.
Yeah, this list is surprising, but also not when you look at the percentages, right? If you gave me this list without percentages, I'd be shocked. But if you give it me with these numbers, I've got Sunspot and Iceman, also very accessible, right, for players. They get them very early on. So again, if some of the people who've responded to this have, at lower collection levels, well, yeah, they're probably not running into that many Basts. But one thing I was a little bit surprised at is that, like, Yondu and I guess Zero makes sense, but that Bast and Yondu make it, and then like the Hood or Titania don't make it on there, because I was like, those two, Hood especially is like a classic 1-drop at this point, I think anyway, and has a very powerful effect. So like the fact that and Titania, which I think is still being explored with how good Titania is in different decks, it really surprises me. But I do feel this is people have played against Bast negative many times and been hurt, and then people have had Yondu rip the best card in their deck now and again and been upset about that. So but this makes sense, right? Sunspot at the top, no surprise to anyone.
Just a little bit of shocker, I just pulled up my spreadsheet. The Hood and Titania both had 1 vote. So
1 vote?
They both had 1 vote each out of 257 people. 1 vote for each of those. So yeah, that's shocking too. Yeah.
I am
because Hood is such a good card, versatile, can be ran in a good number of decks. With most of these, I mean, obviously Sunspot and Iceman can be run in most decks, and then Bass, like you're saying, negative decks, Deadpool decks. Very good tool there. And then, but Zero and Yondu have like very specific decks. Like Zero, you want to do your Red Skull, Shiri deck, stuff like that. And then Yondu's Death Wave that's been around forever. So, yeah, very interesting there. And then, so now this is the tightest race that there is. I do believe it was 2 votes. Yes, 2 votes separated Armor and Lizard here with the 22.9 and the 22.1%. And then Scorpion just 3% behind that. Daredevil lagged a little behind, and the Zabu, I think, yes, was 1 vote behind Daredevil. So, very interesting. I think this really shows that there are a lot of really good 2-drops, and that these are played. I would definitely say these are the most played 2-drops that I see. Like, there's not a card that I can think of that I see more than these 5 2-drops.
I'm definitely opening Marvel Snap now to look.
You're gonna try to find one?
I mean, I genuinely agree with you. Yeah, if I was making this and I was splitting percentages of order or whatever, I'd probably put Lizard first. I think Lizard is insane. I think it's really strong. But Armor is one of those cards that, unlike Lizard, sometimes your opponent plays Armor and you just know you're done. You can't win. You know what I mean? Because it either protects something huge, it actually stops you destroying your stuff, it turns a location off, basically, like Death's Domain and so on, and that changes the dynamics of the game. So I can definitely see it now. Let me quickly look at what 2-drops. Hang on.
And I agree with you with everything you said. Armor is so versatile of what you're saying of surprise playing Armor late into like a Death's Domain or something, or Altar of Death, so that your opponent doesn't know that you can stick something there, protecting your stuff from Shang-Chi's, locking down their Novas or Bucky's. Like, it's just a very versatile. I haven't really seen an Armor just brick, where you draw an Armor, you're just like, this is useless. Like, if you're playing in the deck, you have some kind of goal for it.
Well, it's that thing as well. It's kind of what I was saying about Quake, is that it's well statted, right? It's not like, I draw Armor, but I don't need it. It's a 2-1, right? No, it's a 2-3. It's solid. It's competitive. When you look at the likes of Scorpion, Daredevil, Zabu, well, Armor's 1 more power than all those, so that's looking good. And yeah, there are no other 2-drops that I think would be, because all the other 2-drops are archetype. So like Carnage, I think's really strong, but very specific. Who else was Cloak? Cards like that, right? That are like, well, it's Swarm, really good card, but you play it in discard and that's it. So yeah, this list is pretty spot on, I would say.
And interesting note to also, for anyone that cares about like the history of the game, Lizard and Scorpion have both been buffed before, so
they were unplayable in beta.
Yes.
They were trash. Like, it was
and it's what people dislike too. Like when people are like, "Oh, 1 power, 1 cost," or that's exactly what they did. Lizard, they bumped it up 1 power, and Scorpion, they made from a 3/3 to a 2/2. And it's that simple, and now those cards see so much play. All right, so moving on to the 3 energy cost. Anything stand out here? We got Cosmos, Lockjaw, Wave, Mystique, and Killmonger. Any surprises there for you?
Yeah, well, again, this really shows, at least with the Cosmo Lockjaw thing, that people don't like not being able to do things, right? Like Cosmo, I've talked a lot about Cosmo recently. I don't think it's ruining the game, but it definitely has an effect where sometimes your cards just don't do stuff, and it's like, well, it's not fun playing a card game where your cards don't do anything, right? Unless you're a patron person, I guess. But yeah, I think like Cosmo, I don't even know if it's the best 3-drop. I'd actually disagree that it's the best 3-drop, but I think people think it is because of when it works, you probably lose, right? If your opponent plays Cosmo, like happened to me today, I played Lockjaw, and I had to because it was a tournament match, but I played Lockjaw and some stones, right? My opponent flipped Cosmo first, and my stones were like Leech and Arrow. I was like, right, well, they did nothing, so I'm probably going to lose now. You know what I mean? Like, the impact wasn't there. And I think it's probably not the best 3-drop, but it's the most annoying, therefore the most memorable. I'm really surprised that Mystique's so high.
I think it's just a combo factor, and that it goes in so many decks. Like you run it in Patriot, you run it in Darkhawk, you run it with Darkhawk.
Oh yeah, Darkhawk,
stuff like that.
And also just two dinos, I guess, right? People play when they're on the more budget side of things. But yeah, I'm just looking at 3-drops and like, I don't know. I mean, Patriot in itself is quite strong. Obviously, it's a single archetype, I suppose. I guess I just rate 3-drops differently, but I think like Mr. Fantastic's really good. I think Juggernaut's insane. I think Thor is actually very, very strong. And I'm surprised those didn't make it. But I think there's a theme here, at least with the 3-drops, where they're all just tech cards.
Yeah.
So, like Killmonger, I would put way higher than Mystique. I put Killmonger above Wave.
Whoa. I think Wave is one of the best cards in the game. Like, its effect is so good.
Killmonger, though.
Yeah, but you're targeting 1-drop. Wave can slow down opponent strategies, like Sierra slowing them down, wanting to drop a whole bunch of stuff on turns, can obviously work with She-Hulk and Death and all those cards. Like, yeah, I think Wave has been one of the strongest cards since they've released Wave. That effect is just so powerful.
Wave was so good. I'll tell you a little story. Do we have time for a little story?
Yes, absolutely.
In the beta, because I play from the UK, I had an Apple account and not a Android account. And the Apple account, you couldn't buy anything. I couldn't buy anything in the beta, right? And the Wave Battle Pass came out. I played the whole season without it because I couldn't buy it, and then I acquired it late on. I took a quick trip to the Philippines, let's say, so I could buy it, because, especially because it was like the first Battle Pass card. Looking at it and playing against it, you could not believe how strong it was, because especially back then. Like some of the newer cards do crazy stuff, and some of the buffed cards that we weren't buffed at the time do really powerful things. But like back then, it was like you can just wave and like play a 6-drop on 4. Like that's insane. And if you didn't have it, because it was the first like new card more or less, if you just didn't have it, it was just like you're at a massive disadvantage. Because think of all the decks, especially back then, when you could play Wave and you couldn't. So it was insane. And I do agree. I think Wave's very good. But I do, every time I build a deck, I see if I can fit Killmonger in it. Because you see that 73% sunspot over there? You kill a lot. I kill a lot of sunspots. I'm probably the #1 murderer of sunspots right now, because I play Killmonger in almost any deck, whether I run 1-drops in it or not. And you just have that comfort, even against Thanos, right? People are like, oh, well, Killmonger doesn't beat Thanos. No, but it helps a lot.
Yes.
Like, it kills a lot of stuff. So, yeah, I think the list is okay, though. I think it's not far off at all.
Yeah, and you talking about Wave, that's the card I think everyone knows my love for Arrow by now if you're watching my YouTube video. But the Wave is, I think, the card that showed me the way of Arrow. Like, I remember like playing like 3 mana, or I think it was still 3 mana, like Dinos and Moon Girls and stuff, and just being like, okay, I got these 2 lanes locked down. I'm gonna Wave and on 5 and Arrow on 6, and I'm gonna win. I'm just gonna pull everything to trash lane, and I'll win now.
Especially because back then, outside of specifically Death, if you waved on turn 5, your opponent was playing 1 card. Because no one was, there wasn't that many reductions or like She-Hulk.
Unless they were lucky and had Doctor Doom. But it was still early days. Not everyone had Doctor Doom.
Exactly. So back when Wave was out, you pretty much know if you waved, your opponent played 1 card next turn. And that's all you had to beat. And if you could beat 1 card, there you go. So yeah, it was so strong. And it still is. I got dumpstered the other day in a tournament playing Thanos because my opponent just like Wave, Sandman. And so like if I played Lockjaw on 3, they played Wave on the same turn. Great, I can play 1 stone, which is nothing. And then they Sandman. And I'm like, great, I can still play 1 thing per turn. So it was like it's a big deal. I think Wave is maybe even a little bit underused right now.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think once the meta shifts a little bit, I think Wave will see more play. And that's the interesting thing too. I don't know if I've said it anywhere on Twitter yet, but I plan on doing this for every season going forward. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how stuff with balance changes and with new cards coming out and all that stuff of how it will change people's votes and how we can see cards move around. So going back to the 4 energy cost cards, so I think there's no surprise here. Sherry with a huge uh, voting lead there with a 64.2%, and then Shang-Chi and Wong, Dracula, and Dark Hawk. I think the biggest surprise for me is the Dracula because I have not seen much discard or Dracula since like the first week of MODOK. And so that one still surprises me a little bit. But does this list feel right to you? I mean, this is like I said a community thing, so take that with a
Yeah.
grain of salt. This is a very small percent of the player base, but I mean this list. I sell for Dracula. Dracula feels a little bit out of place. I'm not sure what I would replace with that, but yeah, I just have not seen a lot of Dracula.
Yeah, the only other people play Dracula, me, because I play it with my big deck. I think Dracula's awesome, by the way. But I think the
Yes.
other 4 drops, or what would replace it, would definitely be meta dependent, right?
Hmm.
Because it's really tough talking about this meta because it's so warped, right? One of the best decks in the game plays Cosmo, right?
Hmm.
So then suddenly, Absorbing Man, not great.
Hmm.
Jubilee, not as good. Ghost
Hmm.
Rider, not as good. You know, like, a lot of the 4 drops are on reveal, right? Enchantress, no one's really playing ongoing. So if people were playing ongoing decks, Enchantress would get in there 100%, right? But I think overall, I think it's fine. I'm surprised Darkhawk isn't actually higher than Dracula, but that was probably a minimal amount of actual numbered votes.
It
But
was
looking at
a
the other,
vote.
there you go. So looking at the 4 drops overall, yeah, I think one surprise is people are probably being emotional about
Hmm.
it as well. But I'm surprised Shang-Chi isn't a higher percentage
Hmm.
because Shang-Chi is just factually insane, right? It's one
Yes.
of the
Hmm.
best cards in the game, right? It does something that no other card does, like by a mile though. But obviously Shuri is a bit of a problem right now. So yeah, the forecast I think it's fine because a lot of the forecast cards are like very specific. You look at like I'd say White Queen could maybe make it, but not in this meta.
Hmm.
Rock Slide goes with Dark Oak to an extent, but you look at Jubilee. Well, Jubilee seems pretty weak in this meta, of course. Um, what else have we? Moon Girl, not mind blowing. So yeah, not
Well, see, what I
surprised.
think is funny is if so. This was for Quantumanium, so this was for February. But I feel like
Mhm.
if I would have done this in January, we would have seen Spider Man and Absorbing Man and Moon Girl all here
Right.
because of what Zabu was doing back then.
Hmm.
So I think it definitely does depend on the meta, and if we do
And also
get
Silver Surfer in 3 drops
oh yeah for sure
and
yeah
Brood.
like
Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's going to be the interesting thing moving forward is
Yeah.
seeing how it will change based off cards like that. Um, but not to get sidetracked too much, but we're talking about 4 drops. We were talking about 3 drops with Cosmos earlier. But I was thinking about maybe Cosmo doesn't need a change. Maybe Enchantress does. And instead of Enchantress being an on reveal, make it an ongoing that shuts down other ongoings. So it would shut down Cosmos, and it still shuts down in a ongoings in a
Hmm.
lane, but it would shut down Cosmos.
What worries me, and I've said this a lot because this is what I'm scared of, right? Because we've talked about Cosmo a lot on
Hmm.
my stream, and people, oh, Cosmo has no counter, so it's
Hmm.
too strong. My worry is if we start making tech cards to beat other tech cards, then what tech card beats that tech card, and then that tech card beats that. We start just saying, okay, I mean, we've been close to it many times anyway, but
Hmm.
right, 12 cards in my deck, they're all just tech cards, right? And that's
Hmm.
no fun. And I think for me, like the the only thing they could really do with Cosmo if they were going to change it, there's 2 things. One was one I posted, which is make it 3-2, let's go crazy, make it 3-1, because then it's still extremely strong, but your opponent who plays it is paying a pretty hefty, like, tempo cost, right? If they're spending 3 energy on, like, 1 power or 2
Hmm.
power, it's a lot less. Whereas right now, a 3-3 is, like, on the line of being, well, I've got nothing to do, I'll just play it. It's like sometimes I would play Killmonger on curve with no 1 drops because it's better than passing and the stats are fine. The other option is to make it like a 3-4 and make it just say next turn on reveals don't go off in this location or something. Because then it would still deal with Wong. If your opponent Wongs on turn 4, you play Cosmo turn 5, let's say, and then at least they can't do something crazy on turn 6, right? But you would have to buff its power because then it would be too weak as a 3/3. But I think Cosmo is one of those weird cards that again just deletes fun from the game as an on reveal player. But I don't really know how to fix it, because I would even argue that you could just alter Cosmo to be way worse, because a lot of things already deal with on reveals, right? If you look at Wong, there's like Juggernaut, Aero, Magneto potentially, that you can turn the locations off with like Storm or Scarlet Witch. You can maybe change them with. You can do things, right, to like mess with Wong shenanigans. And I don't know if Cosmo's really the answer, but yeah, I don't know. I think Cosmo's like probably the hardest card to nerf, and it do something.
And that was my suggestion, is like you change Enchantress so it does affect Cosmos, for it has the thing. But you're not changing Enchantress's goal. It's to deal with ongoing cards, but it gives you a way to do it. It would actually, but it does make the card a bit more powerful, because instead of Enchantress playing into a lane with ongoings and shutting it off, then they can play new ongoings into the lane and be fine.
Right.
If you make it ongoing and shuts down other ongoings, then would be more powerful.
Would 2 Enchantresses turn everything off?
It would be like Daredevil. It would just
sure. I'm just trying to start
just
thinking.
negate itself.
How would that work? Yeah, very strange. But yeah, the whole Cosmo thing, I just don't. I don't envy the developers on that one, because if people keep complaining about Cosmo, maybe the devs just ignore it and say, well, actually, we've got data and Cosmo's not that bad. Fine. But if they have to do a change, or feel they have to, other than just making it worse to play, make it like a 3-1, a 3-2, whatever, or like a 4-2, if you want to go crazy, if you really want to go crazy, make it a 4-2, then like, I don't know how else you nerf it, because again, one of the problems is we'll make the Enchantress solution would work 100%, but then you're saying, well, to beat Cosmo, you have to play Enchantress.
Yeah.
And then to beat Enchantress, you have to play an Enchantress yourself. It gets a little bit like, right, what is Shang-Chi still beating big guys, or do we need something to beat Shang-Chi?
Yeah.
And it starts to get a very sort of circles, as opposed to what cool things can my deck do, which is, I think, what Snap should be about, or focusing on at least.
And I do think that is one thing that Second Dinner is good about, is I think they are making most of their decisions based off their data that they have, and not necessarily just like everyone's screaming about Cosmos, so they're going to change Cosmos. Obviously, they will take feedback into stride, and if it gets to a fever pitch, then maybe they'll think about it. But I think most of their decisions are driven by data, so I think they'll figure it out eventually. And then moving on to 5 energy cost. So this is one that I thought was very funny. Aero obviously dominates here with 76.2%, the highest voting of any of the cards for the by energy cost. But what's funny is there was only a 2% vote. It was like 9 votes or something like that. That was different between what cards should be nerfed between Aero and Leech, but a much wider gap here, which is very interesting. When people were voting, there were people that said Leech needs to be nerfed, but then put Aero as a better 5-drop than it. So very interesting there. And then, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the big difference is you can either prepare for, play around to an extent, expect the whole Aero thing, right? Like, it's super powerful, but there are instances where you can at least play around it, or at least expect it to happen. The problem with Leech is, it just, like I said earlier, Aero's annoying because it can move your cards, and sometimes the power doesn't work out and you lose. Leech is annoying because your cards just stop working. Your cards in your card game don't work, right?
Yeah, you just stop playing the game. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's just, imagine if someone just came up to you, you've got your deck, you sit down and you go, actually, all those cards don't do anything now. You'd be like, well, why am I even playing, right? And I think that's what's funny, where people accept the Aero, and I would agree with this. I think Aero is the more powerful card. It's just Leech makes the most people quit, right? Because Aero, you see the outcome, whereas Leech, you play Leech, your cards do nothing, you leave, right? So I think that's where the percentage factor is.
All right, and then we have Red Skull and Sherry getting the same number of votes, and then Magic right behind them. Now for 5 drops, does this list feel right to you?
No, not even close.
Not at all.
How is Magic on there for a start? I think that's my biggest.
That one threw me off a little bit too.
Well, like for example, I think for me, Devil Dinosaur exists. I think is an insane. 5 drops are insane. Devil Dinosaur's pretty crazy.
I think Sandman's very good right now.
Who? Sorry.
Sandman.
I think Captain Marvel and Vision have like always been good. I think they're very strong. I prefer Marvel, but
they're better with Sherry now. So
yeah, exactly. And even it depends how much of a fan of the card you are, and I guess it depends how many people have it. But like, I think Valkyrie's very good as well. People could argue if Shuri's insane and Red Skull's insane, then Taskmaster's insane, right? Yeah, I don't know. And I would argue Nimrod's pretty good too, but that's just me, I guess. But yeah.
Well, this was before Nimrod came out.
Oh, sorry, it was. You are right. You are right. Yes. But Magic, I think, is the most non-offensive card in the world. As far as I've never been magicked in the past few months. When it was turn 6, yes, very annoying. But I've not been magicked for a long time and been that upset about it. You know what I mean?
only see it in Cerebro 3 list. So
well, I was playing it in a Nimrod list actually.
Oh, okay, yeah. To buy
I think
yourself
the one
more time.
Eggs played.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was playing it in that, and honestly, because I've not played Magic since it got nerfed, I was like, hang on a minute, I top decked it on turn 7. On turn 6 as my only card. And I thought, this is dumb. Why can't I play it? I don't need it to make Limbo. And I only just then realized that you literally can't play the card because I've never tried. But I was like, oh, that was a weird choice. Why not just turn the card off, right? Like it doesn't, like Limbo can only be made on turn 6 as opposed to, well, I've top decked this one card because my opponent Dr. Octopus me. I top decked one card. It's 5 energy, it's 3 power, and I just can't play it for no reason. Really weird. But yeah, I think Magic is, if anything, could maybe gain a power. I think Magic would be fine with a little bit of a nudge upwards.
I think it would be fine with like being like a 5/5 or something, like and then you're messing with the Cerebro 3 list, but whatever. But I did a funny story for Magic. So it was the card was nerfed, and I remember seeing a lot of responses on Twitter of being like, "This doesn't change anything. Magic is fine. Magic will be good." And then so I jumped into a game, still had Magic in my deck, and my opponent turn 1 Iceman me and hit it, and I was like, "Oh." Now I can't play this card ever. Oh, okay. Maybe Magic is dead.
Yeah, it's funny as well because like the only strength of Magic was making your opponent play the end of the game, and then you get an extra turn. That was the whole issue, right?
Well, a lot of people,
your opponent did finish the game as far as they were concerned, so they play out everything. You know you don't have to, and then you respond. It's why like the Serra sort of control deck was so good because they play it out. You get an extra turn, and then you sat there like, right, where do I Shang? Where do I do this? Where do I do that? And then you win. So like changing it to non-turn 6 was a giga nerf. You know, like it was so much of a big deal because I mean, you'll know like back then, like Magic was one of the best cards in the game because you could play on turn 6.
And well, see, and that was a thing that I've seen a lot of people is this is a card that kind of broke open Arrow. Is that if you magicked on 6 and they arrowed on 6, like you were in the advantage because they thought it was the end of the game, but it's not.
Exactly. Yeah.
So a lot of people I've seen has said that Magic opened up, being nerfed has opened up for Arrow being stronger. That was a nice counter to it. So very interesting there. But yeah, definitely I don't think is in the top 5 slot. Like if the cards you were listed out a while ago, yeah, like Devil Dino, Taskmaster just seems stronger to me. And Valkyrie, to speak on that, I almost forgot about her. I think that's a card acquisition problem. I think if more people had her, like if she dropped to pull 3 this month, next month we would see how strong she is. Like if everyone could get her out, I think that's a card acquisition problem. And then so we're going to move on to 6 energy cost cards. No surprise here. The big baddie in the room, other than Leech, is Thanos and his stones, obviously, which I appreciate, but it was hard to count these votes because a lot of people would put Thanos, or Thanos because of stones, or Thanos because of time stone, or Thanos because of space stone. So made it hard counting everything, but I understood what they were trying to say. But you have to play Thanos to get the stones, so package deal. And then with 25.6%, about half of what Thanos got. You got She-Hulk, which obviously is another very strong card with the reduction just being strong in general. Then we have Galactus and Magneto and Doctor Doom, which Magneto is the one that stands out to me. I think Magneto is a very strong card, but I can't tell you the last time I've seen a Magneto. So.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. I thought Magneto's okay. For me, I think Galactus. But I think a lot of this is an emotional response. Like, I don't think Galactus is a good card. I think if you lose to Galactus and you give him like 8 cubes, then you probably did something wrong. And for me, when people ask me, oh, what should I spend my tokens on? I say, well, if you want to buy power, right? Buy Thanos, right? Because it's one card, but he builds an archetype by himself, and that archetype will be flexible because it's Thanos the stones, and then how you choose to build it. I've already seen people build just ongoing lists and things like that, bounce lists with Thanos. So Thanos will continue even if we see, some kind of nerf to the current build. But I think like Galactus is not a third tier. I think She-Hulk's amazing, completely agree. Doctor Doom, yes. Magneto, yes. I'm just staring at the 6 drops. And I'm surprised Chavez isn't there, but maybe people don't appreciate Chavez.
Chavez was 1 vote behind Dr. Doom.
Okay, I think Zola's very good. One of my favorite cards, to be fair, so I'm biased. But I wonder, did anyone vote Death, or did they take 6 costs literally?
They did vote Death. Death didn't get that many votes, but just for a heads up on the question, it did say best 1 energy cost or less to include Yellow Jacket and Wasp, and then I also said 6 energy cost or more, to count in Death.
Because for me, I think Death should be up somewhere on that list. I think Death's insane, and I think Death will always be relevant. I don't think that card ever goes away. So yeah, I think Death's really good. I'm just surprised. I get it. Like Galactus seems good, but I personally just don't. Even if I lose or beat it, I just erase the game from my mind because it's just not a game of Snap. So I just forget about it. I'm like, yeah, whatever. So maybe that's me being a bit too down on it. But yeah, I'd definitely move Doom up though. I'd put Doom 3rd.
Well, see, and I think it would be interesting with what we were talking about with the doing this every season. Obviously, I think it's going to move around, and I think Galactus is it's like a perception thing that people that maybe don't have him see people complain about him and think he's the bigger problem than he actually is. Or they play few games against them and get blown out, and they just skews what they think of how powerful Galactus is, because as you're going to see, we're about to get to the top 25, Galactus is up there way higher than I promised that you think. So
I'm looking at it, Luke.
So, yeah. I forgot I sent it to you.
Yeah,
so,
I can see it. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh,
so,
no.
But yeah, so we're gonna with that we're gonna jump over. So just to explain what everyone did. So what I did, the very first question in the survey was list your top 5 best cards in Marvel Snap, 1 through 5. What I didn't tell you is how I was gonna calculate that. So what I did is I put a point system with 1 through 5. With 1, if you voted it the most powerful card, it got 5 points, and then 4, 3, 2, 1, and then I calculated up the points. So we'll move over to that. So this is the top 25 out of the 257 votes. Galactus getting 4th. So the first thing, just to explain a little bit of the numbers and what I saw with doing this. So Arrow by far had the most votes, for number 1. Ended up with, how you do the math, 300 more points than Shuri. And then Shuri and Thanos was within 30 points of each other, so they were very close. But those three were so much higher than everyone else. And then you kind of went down, and then you had the second pool of Galactus in fourth, She-Hulk in fifth, and Leech in sixth. They were all very close to. They were all within about 30, 40 points of each other. And then you had another drop off. But yeah, so going down, so just looking at the list here, is there anything that stands out to you in the top 10? We'll kind of go through
just
this.
In the top 10, okay.
Yeah, just the top 10, and then we'll move along. But what's standing out to you in the top 10 here?
So of course Galactus is not the fourth best card in the game. That's just untrue in every sense. If it was the fourth most annoying card to lose to in the game, sure, like I can get on board, which is maybe what people have actually replied with. But I think overall, Arrow, Shuri, Thanos, She-Hulk. I think She-Hulk is maybe the best fair card in the game. Does that make any sense?
Yes. Yeah.
I don't think it's imbalanced. I think it's fine, but I think it's insane. It's like one of those. A lot of time when people talk about nerfs, it's like this card's strong. It needs nerfing. No, strong cards are allowed to exist. The game would be very boring without strong cards, and I think She-Hulk's right at the top. Like so good, but fair. Leech, Cosmo. I don't think Cosmo's the seventh best card. Sorry. Again, same with Leech. Shang-Chi up there, 100%. I love Lockjaw, but Lockjaw's only even close to on that list because Thanos is there. I'm one of the few consistent Lockjaw players since beta, I guess. Not that many people are playing Lockjaw, okay, before Thanos, so throwing that out there. But yeah, I think of this meta, which is obviously what this list is for, not overall, just this meta. It's probably fairly accurate with what the terrors of the meta are, but I just think if Galactus even has to be in top 10, I would drop it straight down to 10 because the card isn't good. It gets you a cube or two max, or it should get you a cube or two max. Outside of that, I think like Shang-Chi, for me, Shang-Chi and Galactus could swap, pretty easily because I think Shang-Chi is every single game where you play a deck with a card with more than 9 power, you sit there and think, what if my opponent Shang-Chi is? Can I win if they play Shang-Chi? What if they don't draw it? What if they do draw it? And the whole game plan revolves around, if I get Shang-Chi, do I lose? Right? And then you constantly play with that mindset. So I think Shang-Chi and Galactus could easily swap. And then outside of that, if we keep in that 10, it looks okay. Not too crazy. But I think a lot of this is it's almost like a frustration list. Right? Like that's what it looks like to me.
I think it also ties in to the strongest decks because if you look at it, it falls into very line. Like you have Arrow obviously played in a lot of decks, and I also think Arrow is the strongest, most balanced card. Like fair cards, like I think Arrow's fine. I know I'm in a boat by myself. The one change I would make to Arrow is that it pulls in order. The only way for that is more of a way to play around it so that you know how she's going to pull. I think that makes the card a lot more easy to stomach.
It's the same with Magneto as well. I think that should just be things are pulled in order if they're moved like that in that fashion, right? If you're moving your opponent's things and it just has a blanket movement like Magneto, like Arrow, then it pulls in order of play. I think if it's like Polaris and it just selects a random one, I think that feels more okay because it picks one card to move. But if it's just a blanket movement, it should be in order because it just doesn't feel great where it's like, oh, well, if it just pulled that one instead of that one, I won. And I did play it in that order. But anyway, yeah, I'm with you. I think I've also said that I genuinely think people have told me this would kill the card, and I don't think it would. But I think they could actually buff Arrow's power again and make it just do the next card your opponent plays. Because that still does a lot of the work you want Arrow to do. It still messes with your opponent. It's just, it would be more manageable. But again, I am not. I think Arrow's like okay. It's as in I know it's strong. I'm not saying it's weak, but I mean to tolerate. It's probably just over the line for me in strength. It's just a little bit, and I love Arrow, but it's just one of those things where I think the biggest issue is the difference in your opponent arrowing on 5 or 6 is so crazy to how you play, and they can do either. There's not even really that much of a punish, right? Because you can play. Okay, they're gonna arrow me on 5. You play, they don't, and then you're like, oh no. But
Mm-hmm.
then sometimes if they arrow you on 6, you should have played on 5. And it's like it's so strong to mess around with. I wish there was a little bit more counterplay. But again, I play a lot of decks that don't flood the board, so I don't get a lot of ability to play around arrow by like filling one location and saying, "Well, you want to pull me over there and you can't." But yeah, I think arrow's up there. But you are right. This is basically those 10 cards are pretty much the
Yeah.
meta in a box, right?
All right. So moving on to the next. So what the next 10 here, running
Hmm.
down. What? How do you feel with these 10?
These are okay, actually. There's one that I think really surprises. I guess there's two that really surprise me. Null, but I guess that's purely there because of Galactus. Because again, like it's difficult to look at it as okay, these are the best cards of that season, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of, because if Galactus is winning games, a lot of that will be because you have Null in hand. But
Mm-hmm.
Null as a card is not one of the best 25 cards of the season, in my opinion. But I guess then yeah, Null fits in there. And the only other one is I'm surprised Wong's so high because who gets to play Wong when
Yeah.
everyone's playing Cosmo or Aero, right? Like who? Because tell me if people can do it, I would love to join in. I love Wong. I play so much Wong decks, but with Cosmo and Aero, it feels nigh on impossible because like it's like the Aero turn 5 turn 6 thing. How how do you play it, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
the only thing I've tried to mess around with is doing weird Invisible Woman stuff where you play Invisible Woman, you play some cards behind it, then you play a Wong out somewhere else, and then they're like, right, well, what's going on here, and you try and confuse people into it. But I'm surprised Wong's so high. But other than that, and I guess Dracula, but I guess again, if it was Quantumania, then like that included Modoc,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like again, I was jamming a lot of Modoc, in which Dracula's very good as well. So yeah, for me, it's really just Wong, unless my Wong Modoc deck really took off, and that's what people because that was a good deck, and that's what people are remembering. I hope so.
So trying to remember, I'm pretty sure Silver Surfer was still a thing at the beginning of the season. So that might be the Wong
Mm.
leftover there is
Well,
with the Silver
true,
Surfer
true.
decks. And then Noel, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I love Noel. I love messing around with Noel and Noel decks. But this is to me the card that stands out on this entire top 25. That this card only sees play after Galactus.
Mm.
Like
And
that's
I
the
wish it
only thing.
didn't.
It's the most niche
Uh,
card on the entire list.
I really hope, like for example, that say Negasonic might help
Mm-hmm.
make Null just a card to play and not right, I've got to play it in Galactus or some like weird meme Mr. Negative deck or something. You know what I mean? Because I think Null as a card and as a concept is really cool, but
Mm-hmm.
you just can't consistently make it bigger than like a Hulk unless
Mm-hmm.
you're playing Galactus and suddenly like, well, if that's the case, I'll just play Hulk, which is always a
Yeah,
6/12.
yeah.
You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So I hope that something changes where at least that style, because I keep trying to play it and it keeps just not being good enough. Like I tried it with Nimrod and then just Destroyer Zola was better.
Mhm.
And it's like, right, well, if Nimrod doesn't work where I'm destroying, bigger cards, then it's just not going to, is it? So, yeah, although it's weird that Null's on there, I hope it's on there for better reasons in the future.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what you're talking about with Nimrod. I think that could definitely be a thing because one of the things that I've tried with Noel when it first came out was to Armazola it. If you could get it
Yeah.
like 10 or 20
Mhm.
power and then Armazola it, and you get like 240s, that's pretty cool.
It's rough
And
though,
then
right? Because again, that's the sorry to
yeah,
interrupt.
Mhm.
That's one of the biggest, I think, reasons why Aero is so high on all these lists because oh, you want to null something? Not with Aero, you won't. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? Like, nope. Sorry, you want to like Zola null? Nope, you can't.
Mhm.
Oh, you want to do this big like end crazy enter? Nope. And I think that's one of the problems, isn't it? Why Aero is so much even higher than like Shuri, Thanos, whatever, is because Aero just locks out so much stuff. It's actually incredible. And the more I'm talking about it, the more I want to see her get nerfed to just one card, even. Because it would still be at Zola, right?
Yeah.
You would have to do, like, people would have to start playing Wasp, which I think would be hilarious. If people played Wasp to beat Aero, I would very much love it. But yeah, it's a very cool card, but not top 25. What a load of rubbish.
Now,
So I also think people concede, right?
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people just assume they have null and death,
Yep.
so they just concede anyway. So yeah, anyway. Sorry.
Yeah, and they might not even have it, and that's just the thing.
Oh,
Especially
yeah.
if your opponent snaps. If your opponent Galactus, and then snaps, are you going to be like, okay, well, you probably have null death. Like, I'm just going to leave now.
Yeah, you just you give them the cube, you walk away, and hope they have a nice day. That's it.
Yeah, and talking about retreating, one card I don't want to skip over. I forgot that is interesting to me is Kang. I think Kang, the biggest strength of it is the cube saving on the climb to infinite. But interesting fact with this is Kang was released on the Tuesday, and then I had the weekend. That weekend was the weekend that this was the poll was taken. So this card was only out for less than a week, and still got the 13th slot. And I think it's because how big and flashy that it is, and you being able to do actual infinite combos with it and stuff. I think maybe people just thought that broken interaction warranted the votes.
I think for me, Kang, I would not be surprised if we got the hidden numbers from Second Dinner or something. And Kang was like the most purchased Series 5 card because I get time relevant. You know what I mean? Like release time or whatever. Because, yeah, Thanos Galactus huge, of course, but like going into Kang, everyone was ready for it to be broken, right? Everyone knew. Like its ability was so strong and broken. And also, I feel like for a long time, none of the other cards that were released in Series 5 were even good. Unless you had loads of spare tokens, right? But for people really holding on to those collector's tokens, I think a lot of people bought Kang. And I think that's why opinions of it rose so quickly, because you weren't even, I noticed, you weren't facing the odd Kang on ladder, especially on release, right? It was like Kang left, right, and center, like day after day after day. So I think Kang's pretty strong. I still can't decide whether I like it or not, because sometimes I dig myself into trouble by playing Kang. Because I Kang, see what my opponent did, and then so many times I've had it where my opponent just does exactly the same turn.
You can overthink
I'm sat there,
for sure.
I'm sat there thinking, but surely they wouldn't, because that's really dumb. And then they do, and I'm like, did I play myself? Would I have been better to just not play Kang, play the good turn, and win? And it gets really weird. But I do think it's very interesting in this meta because of the outcomes, I think. Because I played recently in a tournament match and seen the outcomes of Reality Stone, Lockjaw outcomes, stuff like that is like, right. Because also, not only what the outcomes would be if they play the same turn, but also if you see Lockjaw pop out a couple of cards, you know what cards are in their deck, right? So it's not like they chose not to play them and they're holding them. They're not there, right? Because it can only pull cards out of the deck. So I think that's pretty strong. And it does guard you. It allows you to play a little bit fast and loose on ladder, right? If you go, what happens if I do this? This could go crazy and win. You play it, and then you see they would have a better turn. You go, oh, okay, I'll lose a cube, whatever, leave. So I think it's like weirdly like a better ladder card than it is a battle mode card. Because in battle mode, I've got it in my deck in this tournament, and it scares me. I'm there looking at it thinking, oh, do I really want to do this? And then you're horrified if your opponent's playing Cosmo. Because then you just sit there and think, oh, God, no, please. 5 energy pass.
And I think that's two interesting points. I think you can definitely outplay yourself with Kang. You can overthink it for sure. You can definitely be like, they're definitely not going to do the same play. Or what if they do? And then it's the whole, like, what if I know, but they know? Like, what's going on here?
It's super weird.
And then, yes. So one thing I did not think about with King when the card was coming out is that it shows you the outcome of RNG. So I think that's a big thing. Obviously, you can move one thing around and it changes the RNG. But I do think that is an important thing with King to be able to see. Because even like what you were saying, the information, if you're playing against the Lockjaw deck and you see what pops out, it's not even like, you know that if they play that exact order, that will pop out. But you know that card's not in their hand. You don't have to play around that card in their hand.
What's crazy, obviously, like I said, I've just played a tournament match right before I came on here, and you know what happened? And this is why I think Kang's super weird to try and decide if it's good or not. My opponent played Kang. On a turn, I put gems into Lockjaw. So then I knew my outcomes of the gems if I played them. My opponent let that happen. So then I can look at that. Oh, this and this popped out. Do I want those to pop out? No? Okay, I'll play different things, right? And I'll mess with it. Or if they're great outcomes, say like Leech popped out, I'd be like, I'm doing that again. Because I know Leech is going to pop out. And my opponent made that happen at no downside to me, because all my opponent saw was me have a really good turn. And guess what? They have to decide whether I'm going to have the same turn again. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm trying to, I just can't decide whether Kang's a card you should put in your deck or not. At least in, like I said, in battle mode especially. Because in battle mode, you've got to work with this information all the time. On ladder, probably a bit more simple because you just play Kang, snap, see if you get free cubes, right?
Exactly.
But yeah, in the battle mode, which is mainly what I think about most of the time, is like, I've got Kang in my list and I think I regret it because I feel like it just gives my opponent more options than me. I don't know, it's weird.
It's definitely a very interesting card. Now, so I really want to know what you think about these last 5 here, but something I did want to point out. So you're talking about earlier with the 5 drops in the game, talking about you're surprised not to see Valkyrie there. So what's interesting is Valkyrie here at 21st beats out Armor, which was the winner of the best 2 drop. So I think that's very interesting. But I do think the people that voted for this either have seen streamers use Valkyrie to a great degree or lucky enough to get Valkyrie. I think this card, as we keep doing this, if the meta kind of stays, because Valkyrie is a very good counter to the Shiri decks with Red Skull. And so I think if you see stuff like that continue, I think we'll see Valkyrie climb up this list as we go on.
I was playing a list on stream today that I made a Silver Surfer list, but the top end was Sarah Valkyrie. So then on turn 6, I could play a 3-drop Silver Surfer, or like Valkyrie, then Surfer. So like you can set them all to 3 and then buff the 3 drops you have. And sometimes I was like, yeah, Valkyrie just wins because they played a Red Skull. It's like, yeah, okay, seems good. Obviously Cosmo, bit of a problem. But I think a lot of the time, like, Valkyrie is just a good card. Like, as long as you're not playing like tall decks, right? You want to play just a little bit wide, because then I put like a Mysterio into a Silver Surfer deck because, well, one, it fills up the board, and then it's one more free token for one of the clones to like just play Valkyrie with that you don't even really pay for, right? Because you still have the 2/4. So it's like, I think, because I've only really played Valkyrie in Cerebro 3 mainly, but I think the more and more like time goes on, I agree that Valkyrie is just going to be like an actual card. You know what I mean? Like a card people consider and not a sort of niche, oh, this goes in Cerebro 3 because yeah, it makes 3 power cards and so on. Like, I think it's going to be, well, if my opponent plays a big thing, I have Valkyrie in any other card there, you win. You're winning. You know, even if you don't do it on turn 6, you're ahead. And their big thing they spent a lot of energy on probably is now basically smaller than yours, or you just reduce that power down completely if you don't have Shang. So yeah, I think Valkyrie's pretty good, and I think that card's power level is only probably going to get better as time goes on.
Well, yeah, Valkyrie, one of the big things with it is if you have an Ant-Man or some ongoing effect, or if you have something like a Blue Marvel buffing, or like
a Silver Surfer afterwards.
Yes, if you have anything like that that's buffing your card, you can beat just about anything. And another interesting thing you're talking about, you know, they go big with a Red Skull or something, even if it's Shiri or whatever. That means they're probably going to have priority, which is exactly what you want when you're playing Valkyrie. You want them to have priority. You want them to fill the lane so you can hit everything. And then if you're playing Valkyrie, you do need a few things that's going to give you the edge, like Blue Marvel or something. So, Yeah, I think
It's one of
Valkyrie's
the
definitely
reasons I think
considered.
like it's a shame Ghost is 1 energy because
Yeah.
Killmonger just kills it. You know, whereas if it was like a 2/2, 2/3 maybe,
Hmm.
2/3 probably, that card would be pretty interesting actually. If that was a 2/3, it doesn't just die to Killmonger.
Hmm.
Like that card would be significantly better because right now, unfortunately, I feel like it's one of the most pointless cards in the game because it's specific in what it does. And it's a specialized card anyway, and then it's a 1 drop.
Yeah.
So it's like, right, okay, you have to play it on turn 6.
Yeah. You and me could talk for 2 hours about Killmonger and one drops because I think Killmonger is so good, and I'm fine with Killmonger, but I think that limits one drops so much. Like you see it like with the voting, and even on this list with the one drops being Sunspot and Iceman. Sunspot, first of all, just crazy value, and you pair it with Arrow, and it's fine. And then Iceman, you don't care if it dies; you already get the value when you
Well, it's
play
done
it.
its job. Yeah, 100%. It's
Another thing that sticks out to me here is Mr. Negative. Like I understand Mr. Negative is a really strong card, but I do feel like this is just like kind of seared into people's memories about how good Mr. Negative used to be. I'm not sure if it'd be in my personal top 25.
it wouldn't be in mine, but I do think that I'm saying this as I admit now on stream. I rant that the few times I run into it, they always get Iron Man
Mm-hmm.
and Mystique,
Yep.
perfect. They always just draw the nuts, and that's not true. It's just that they
Yeah.
concede by that point. But you always remember getting absolutely obliterated by negative, right? It's not top 25 because if it was, more people would play it and they don't. So because it's a deck
Exactly.
in itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I could think of plenty of other cards. I'd put like honestly, I'd put like Electro in above negative as a
Mm-hmm.
card. If we, it's that easy to just pluck a card out that I think's better. So yeah, negative's just one I think people remember more than anything.
Yeah, and then Mystique, obviously a strong card. We've talked about Mystique a little bit, but one I want to talk about more is American Chavez. I don't know your opinion on this card. I am probably the biggest hater of American Chavez. Like, I liked American Chavez at the beginning, but the everyone run American Chavez in every deck just because it like thins your deck and makes your cards that you want to draw move to the top. Like, to me, that's a myth. Like maybe there's numbers out there that prove me wrong, but I just don't feel like that's ever a thing. I don't feel like I draw better because I put Chavez in my deck. And I know 90% of the time when I put Chavez in my deck to try that, I'm disappointed when I draw it on turn 6. Like, oh, I could have drawn the other card I need to win, but I drew Chavez instead.
Okay, so I play a discard deck with Modok, Dracula, and APOC, and I still don't run Chavez, so I'm kind of with you. The only deck I run Chavez in right now is the Thanos deck, and that's purely because I don't play Thanos a lot, and I got the list off people who do. There's no good reason other than I trust other people that play the deck more than me. I don't particularly like it in Thanos. It doesn't particularly offend me because I'm doing powerful things before I care about turn 6 anyway. Um, but yeah, I played Chavez tons. I had to split it a million times to get my inked one as well. But I think right now it's just not. I think Chavez could be a 6/10 and it would be fine. They could rebuff it because I don't think anyone's with a power level right in the game right now. I don't think anyone's going to kick off about a 6/10 that does nothing played on turn 6, right? If it actually gets played, right? No one's going to be like, oh no, I'm going to lose now because they played this 6/10 that has no effect. So I'm kind of with you. I don't think Chavez is that good. People always ask me, why don't you play Chavez to thin? Why don't you play that? It's like, because I never want to draw it on turn 6 either.
Yeah.
I know I never draw it on turns 1 to 5, but I want to add 6 to that list. And if I don't put Chavez in my deck, I don't draw it on turn 6. I just put a card I want to draw. Um, so yeah, I don't like getting into the numbers and all this of like, oh well, actually increases the odds of you drawing this card by this. Don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Don't want to draw it, and I only play it in decks that other people have said this is a good deck list. Try this, and then I'll put it in because it's not my list, right? To try
Cool.
it. But yeah, I'm kind of with you. I don't hate the card. I just think it was nerfed in a world where it was that one of the, if not the strongest 6 drop, because not only was it more power, But the decks were just different back then.
Well,
right?
it's Jubilee. Jubilee was the card
Jubilee
that made
pulled
the
it,
card
yeah,
broke.
yeah.
It wasn't Chavez. It was Jubilee. And
Yeah.
they fixed Jubilee, and then it leaves Chavez as the normal card, but they still decrease the power. Because I agree with you. Power could definitely go up, and it would be fine. And what you were saying was, I don't want to hear the numbers either. There's probably going to be one comment in my YouTube comments that's going to be,
At least.
oh, Chavez will make your deck 2% better. But it will make it 2% more boring too. And I want to draw my big card on turn 6 that I need and not Chavez. That's not going to win me the game.
Well, I had the big issue where, especially in the MODOK deck, like I was saying, is, well, what if I don't draw MODOK, and then on turn 6, I need, maybe APOC off the top, I need MODOK. Like, for me, I would rather have, there's, out of the 3 cards in my deck, there might be 2. Or I guess 4 cards, right? Sorry, because you end the game with 3. Out of the 4 cards left in my deck, say like 2 of them would be good on turn 6. Well, I'll take that over having a guaranteed Chavez every time and having a slightly whatever better draw. Again, I'm not going to do numbers, but just from a gameplay perspective for me, I would rather just put other cards I would prefer to draw and play than a card I don't want to draw but then have to draw. You know what I mean? It's kind of that weird sort of circle. But yeah, that's where I'm at with it anyway.
Alrighty. Well, that's it. Thank you for taking your time out to talk with us. So everyone, please make sure you go follow Raven. Make sure you leave a comment. What do you think about the list below? Find us on Twitter. Talk about it. Engage. Because once again, not a definite list, but it was a fun community voted survey. Definitely look out for the next one next season. I'm going to do one every season moving forward. But thanks, and have a good one.